Hello everyone, this is Goosebumps Godzilla, and today I'm going to be talking about the 27th Goosebumps book in the original series, and that is A Night in Terror Tower. And basically, I'm going to be talking about how the main antagonist of this story, or book, the Lord High Executioner, is actually Mr. Zarwid from Be Afraid, Be Very Afraid. And so yeah, that's pretty much what I'm going to be talking about in this video. But before we continue on, there are going to be some spoilers for 3 or so Goosebumps books, with the first one and the biggest one that's going to be spoiled being A Night in Terror Tower. So yeah, I'm going to basically, right after the spoiler warning, go over a quick overview of A Night in Terror Tower, or try to do a quick overview of Night in Terror Tower. They usually go a bit longer than expected, but yeah, I'm going to be talking about in huge, major spoiler details, A Night in Terror Tower. So yeah, basically some heavy spoilers for that one. Also, we're going to be having some medium to minor spoilers, I guess, for Be Afraid, Be Very Afraid. I'm really not going to be talking about the first half of the book. I'm mainly going to be talking about the book's main antagonist, Mr. Zarwid, and also I'm going to be talking about a specific world that is introduced in Be Afraid, Be Very Afraid. Again, in very, very minor detail, try not to get into many spoilers for Be Afraid, Be Very Afraid, since this book's kind of older and hasn't been reprinted and stuff like that. So yeah, I'm going to try to go into as much less detail as possible for Be Afraid, Be Very Afraid, but I will be having some spoilers that may kind of in some way ruin the book. Or not ruin it, but, spoil some aspects of the story. The book's, honestly, in my personal opinion, not the best. But anyway, so yeah, also the third and final book that is going to be spoiled in this video is a Give Yourself Goosebumps book special edition, and that is Return to Terror Tower. It's actually a sequel, one of the only sequels to be a Give Yourself Goosebumps book to an original series Goosebumps book. So yeah, we're going to be having some minor spoilers for Return to Terror Tower. Nothing major. I'm just going to be talking about the main antagonist, or recurring main antagonist, the Lord High Executioner, and 2 specific endings, I think, where he has certain powers. And also, I'm going to be talking about a certain animal, or 2 certain animals or so, that do appear in Return to Terror Tower, but very, very minor spoilers for that. I'm really not going into much detail, if any detail at all, on them, especially since Return to Terror Tower, just like Be Afraid, Be Very Afraid, is sort of rare. It's a whole lot more rarer than Be Afraid, Be Very Afraid, and stuff like that. And so, yeah, Return to Terror Tower is pretty rare, so I'm going to go into less details as possible. And plus, it's Give Yourself Goosebumps book, so since there's so many endings, it's really hard to spoil, a Give Yourself Goosebumps book. And so, yeah, that's pretty much all we're going to be talking about in this video. So let's continue on to the main point of this video, and that is proving how the Lord High Executioner is Mr. Zarwid. And so in the book that the Lord High Executioner first appears in, let me see, it's Night in Terror Tower. I'm sorry about that, guys. Basically, in the story, there's the main protagonists, who are Eddie and Sue. And basically, they are touring England right now during the events of A Night in Terror Tower, and basically they come to visit, Terror Tower. And during this touring group that they're with, again, they're in England, and their parents have basically gone out to a work meeting there, and so they basically get a whole day off, just touring all the sites in in England. And so, yeah, they join this tour group, and they're going to this place called Terror Tower, which is actually this old, sort of, dungeon, sort of. It's like a place where they tortured people, murdered people, executed them, stuff like that. And so that's basically where they're visiting, and that's kind of why it's called Terror Towers, just because of all the stuff that's happened there. And basically, they go in and take the tour and stuff like that, and they learn about actually 2 kids, who were there, and they were actually disappeared. They were a prince and princess, and they were killed in Terror Tower, so they learn about that. And then, at one point, while they're touring the area, they get lost, and soon it's after hours for Terror Tower to be open, and so they're stuck, basically, in this giant castle, after dark, and then they start being chased with this guy with a wide-brimmed hat. So basically, they see this guy, he has a wide-brimmed hat, and then he starts chasing them, trying to capture them, and so, they're obviously trying to get away from him. And so, they try to get away from him. They eventually escape Terror Tower by going through the sewer system, I believe. And so, yeah. And anyway, so they escape from the guy with the wide-brimmed hat. They make it to their hotel where they're supposed to be staying at. But then it is revealed, actually, that they can't actually remember their last name. Not only that, but I don't think they could remember where they lived. And other than they lived in America. And they also couldn't remember their parents. So this obviously freaks them out, and so they're trying to remember, their lives and stuff like that. But again, they can't remember. And so then the guy with the wide-brimmed hat shows up again, and another chase ensues. But eventually now, the Lord High Executioner actually corners the two children, and then gets these two magic stones out that manages to transport them back in time to the medieval times. So there it is actually revealed that the Lord High Executioner is, that guy with the wide-brimmed hat is actually the Lord High Executioner, and so yeah, he takes those two children in and basically throws them in a dungeon. And there they meet this other guy who's in the dungeon named Morgrid. And it turns out that those two prince and princess people that I was talking about earlier, that is actually the main protagonist and the main protagonist's brother. According to the story, Morgrid does a magical spell that sends him back in time to help them, escape from being killed by the people in Terror Tower. And so yeah, that's pretty much why the Lord High Executioner managed to... It was actually never revealed how he specifically manages to go back in time. All it's revealed is basically the Lord High Executioner manages to get his hands on two magical stones that sends people back in time. So Lord High Executioner goes back in time to basically kill the main, or get the main protagonist and the main protagonist's brother to be killed. And so then, though, in a dramatic turns event, right before they're actually supposed to be murdered, Ed and Sue, or Eddie and Sue, basically the main protagonists of the story, as I mentioned before, they managed to steal, actually, those two stones that bring you back in time. And they basically use those to bring Morgrid, them, and yeah, that's it. Morgrid and them back into the modern era. And so, thus stopping the Lord High Executioner from killing them. And I believe that's the end of the book. I don't think there's a twist. Maybe there is a twist. I remember in the episode, the Lord High Executioner actually manages to go back to the future with them and steal one of the stones, but I think that was just in the episode. I'm not really sure. I really actually kind of want to reread A Night in Terror Tower again. Just because, from what I remember, it was actually a pretty good book. But anyway, so yeah, that's A Night in Terror Tower. And there are a couple of weird things in the book. Nothing really with the plot, even though there are a couple of weird things that I will mention later on this video. But there is one specific weird thing, and that is how the Lord High Executioner is portrayed as a guy with a wide-brimmed hat. Because if you look at the cover art for A Night in Terror Tower, you kind of see this guy with an axe and a hood. I kind of wish they stuck with this one, actually, in the book. Made the Lord High Executioner, instead of a guy with a wide-brimmed hat, this guy with a hood, who's got the giant axe, and stuff like that. I think that'd be pretty cool, and stuff like that. But yeah. Anyways, so the main protagonist, or not the main protagonist, the Lord High Executioner, though, is portrayed in the book to be, the guy with the wide-brimmed hat, as I mentioned before. But then, if you look at the original cover art for A Night in Terror Tower, you see this guy with a hood and an axe. And so I think maybe this character does appear in the book, and so, that kind of makes it up. But then, in the other cover art, they all feature the same character. You can see it in Brandon Dorman's reprint cover art. You can see that in, the French cover art, I believe. A bunch of different cover art for Night in Terror Tower. You see the Lord High Executioner portrayed as this guy with a hood and an axe. And so, this might be, again, this character does sort of appear in the book, and plus, again, it's much cooler looking antagonist than the guy with the wide-brimmed hat, so they probably just stuck with that. And, the Lord High Executioner actually is the Lord High Executioner. But then, you take a look at the Goosebumps film, where they have the Lord High Executioner portrayed just like the one in the Tim Jacobs cover art and the Brandon Norman cover art, and all of the other, regional cover arts, all of which, made the Lord High Executioner be a, hooded, cloaked figure with an axe. And then if you even take a look at some of the merchandise, I think one of the merchandise even says that the guy with the hood and the axe is the Lord High Executioner, but keep in mind, though, that that merchandise line does sometimes get those things wrong. Like for Horror at Camp Jelly Jam merchandise that they did, they said Buddy, a human character in the story of Horror Camp Jelly Jam, was actually King Jelly Jam. So they can make mistakes with stuff like that. So that might be, the problem with the Lord High Executioner. They betrayed him, what he looks like in the cover art, and that's it. But then, if you take a look at the Goosebumps Monster Survival Guide, they actually say that the Lord High Executioner is actually the guy that you see in the Goosebumps film. That is basically the same person that you see in the Tim Jacobs cover art for A Night in Terror Tower. Thus, basically saying that the guy in the cover art for A Night in Terror Tower and Return to Terror Tower, actually, I forgot to mention that, even in Return to Terror Tower, they have that same beheading guy, which I don't even think a hooded, cloaked character with an axe actually even appears in Return to Terror Tower. But you can see that all these portrayals of the Lord High Executioner feature a guy with a hood and an axe, and even in certain areas, like merchandise and the Goosebumps Monster Survival Guide, even say that he is the guy with the hooded cloak and the axe and stuff like that is the real Lord High Executioner. And so, thus meaning that actually possibly the guy with the wide-brimmed hat is actually not the Lord High Executioner and someone else. And not just in the cover art and, from the Goosebumps Monster Survival Guide and stuff like that. Even in the book of Night in Terror Tower, there are some weird things about the Lord High Executioner, like the fact that he's willing to do so much just to, get back in time to get these children. I mean, I get it, he's working for the king and maybe something's wrong and stuff like that, but he basically finds a way to go back in time to basically get the main protagonists, Eddie and Sue, basically get them back out of time and into the real world to basically kill them. I mean, I don't know, he's the Lord High Executioner. I'm surprised he even has a knowledge of magic and stuff like that. And even in Return to Terror Tower, he actually has magical powers like mind control, actually, and also like telekinesis or something like that in two of the endings for Return to Terror Tower. So I'm not really sure. The Lord High Executioner with the wide-brimmed hat is kind of weird. He has all these magical powers, something a Lord High Executioner probably wouldn't have. And it's kind of weird that he would go through all the hassle just to get Eddie and Sue. Again, it's kind of hard how you'd even figure out how they went back in time, because honestly, it seems like Morgred is very loyal to Eddie and Sue. After all, he risked his life to send them back in time. And you could say maybe that he is a traitor. Maybe he taught the Lord High Executioner how to go back in time and stuff like that. And then, because it is kind of weird how they magically end up in the same cell as Morgred and stuff like that. But, Morgred can't be a traitor, because in the end of the story, he actually goes with the main protagonist and the main protagonist's brother, and basically lives with them as confirmed in Return to Terror Tower, and serves as basically as a parental figure, thus kind of disproving the fact that Morgry could be a traitor. So somehow the Lord High Executioner figures out magic, how to go back in time and all that stuff, and then he basically chases down the main protagonist and the main protagonist's brother all throughout Terror Tower, or in the modern age and stuff like that. And he goes through all this hassle just to get them. And I find that very, very odd and kind of strange as well, just because, it's not like his life was on the line. After all, he does fail in the end of A Night in Terror Tower, and then returns again in Return to Terror Tower. So, it's quite odd how basically the Lord High Executioner, sees this, keeps chasing after them so much in A Night in Terror Tower, even though he pretty much has nothing to do with the events of the book. Or, with him trying to kill him. I mean, they disappear, and big deal, that's the end of it, sort of thing. And the fact that he goes through all this trouble just to chase after them and find them is, I think, kind of odd. And thus, overall, I think disproving the fact that he is actually the Lord High Executioner from the medieval era. And I personally think he most likely would have to be a wizard. After all, he has magical powers that basically send you back in time. And also, in Return to Terror Tower, as I said before, he has magical powers to read your mind and mind control you. So, I don't know, I just think it's very weird, and so yeah, I would say overall that if the guy with the wide-brimmed hat is anything, he most likely will have to be a wizard, again, due to the magical powers that he has, and all the magical knowledge that he has, and stuff like that. And so overall, I would say that is most likely who this guy with the wide-brimmed hat is. But which wizard in the Goosebumps universe could be the guy with the wide-brimmed hat? And so, overall, I think the only person that would actually fit this bill would have to be Mr. Zarwid from Be Afraid, Be Very Afraid. There aren't really many wizards in the Goosebumps series, or that make a major appearance. There is, I think, Dr. Hallows or something like that from Five Massive Doctor Scream, but you don't really get too much of him, and I highly doubt it's him, personally, just because that guy's actually, I think, a good guy. And, again, there's not really too many wizards. The guy who created Slappy, I'm not going to get into too much detail on that, but he was alive, I think, during the 1800s, so most likely would not be him either. And the only real wizard, again, that would fit really the bill set by this, guy with the wide-brimmed hat, is Mr. Zarwid from Be Afraid, Be Very Afraid. And so, overall, I would most likely say this is the guy who is trying to chase after the kids in A Night in Terror Tower. So basically, just in case you don't know who Mr. Zarwid is, Mr. Zarwid is basically this guy who is very grumpy and hates children, basically, and it turns out he's actually a wizard, and at some points, he likes to suck children inside this game called Be Afraid, Be Very Afraid, and basically inside this game, there are a bunch of, dragons and monsters and stuff like that, forcing the children in there to try to survive. And that's pretty much who Mr. Zarwid is. He's basically a wizard that doesn't like children and likes to trap them inside this game called Be Afraid, Be Very Afraid. And so I personally think that's what's going on in A Night in Terror Tower. I think personally he's trying to suck the children in A Night in Terror Tower into his game. I don't know, he does kind of have different methods, I guess, of sucking these people back into games. I'm not really sure why he would use the two stones. That is kind of disproving evidence. But it honestly actually quite makes a lot of sense why we try to kidnap these children and put them in the game. You might say, though, that it seems kind of confirmed that these guys are actually, the two princes, or prince and princess, from A Night in Terror Tower. That they were alive during medieval times and stuff like that. But I'm not really sure that Eddie and Sue were actually alive during medieval times. And that is because of the fact that they can speak the English language, first off. I found that kind of odd. They do not have 2 white stones with them as well. They somehow managed to get money to be on a tourist bus. Like, Morgrid kind of went through some high amounts of detail, honestly, for, to get these children safe. I mean, it makes sense since he's very loyal to them and stuff like that. But he basically somehow, in some way, manages to change the language they speak, because I'm not going to try to add in, historical facts and stuff like that in this video due to it being Goosebumps theory and all of that, but basically, during the medieval ages, they spoke a different language than people in England do today, and I found, he basically manages to change their language, give them knowledge about America and stuff like that, and, also, all at the same time, giving them modern clothes, and also booking them a tourist attraction, and also filling them with memories about what hotel they're staying in, the hotel that they're at, and stuff like that. I don't know, I found that kind of odd, overall, why they would do that, and it's just, I don't know, kind of weird that he went through so much detail when he could just send them to the, other age with their memories intact, and, they would understand. And, yeah, that's pretty much the end of it. Instead of sending them on, like, a tourist bus and stuff like that, I don't know. Just kind of seems highly unlikely that they were actually from the medieval time frame, and most likely during the modern age. And so, I think that is another huge piece of evidence to prove that Mr. Zarwid is basically chasing these kids and trying to suck them in this game, is not only the fact that he's a wizard, and he also has sort of a medieval theme to him, but also the world of A Night in Terror Tower is very similar to the game world in Be Afraid, Be Very Afraid. There are knights in the game world of Be Afraid, Be Very Afraid, and there also is dragons, and all these other mythical creatures. And while in A Night in Terror Tower there isn't really any mythical creatures, mainly just magic and stuff like that, in Return to Terror Tower, actually, the Lord High Executioner, actually, not the Lord High Executioner, I'm sorry about that, guys, but the world that you explore in Return to Terror Tower features monsters, dragons, all that stuff, very similar to the game world in Be Afraid, Be Very Afraid. And it's quite different from the historical world of the medieval ages. Again, I'm not going to go into detail. Most likely, maybe, or again, very likely, actually, that the real world during the medieval ages, in the Goosebumps universe, most likely could have monsters and stuff like that. But I'm just saying, it's very, very similar to the game world in Be Afraid, Be Very Afraid. Again, you have dragons. I think both of them have red dragons. Or at least in Goosebumps Sword Town, there's a dragon. From Be Afraid, Be Very Afraid, that's red. And I think also in Return to Terror Tower, there's a dragon that is red. And while I don't think I've actually watched the event for that, Be Afraid, Be Very Afraid, I do believe the dragon actually talks in there, which would also be another link to Return to Terror Tower, where a dragon does talk as well. And so, also, everyone in the Terror Tower world speaks English. Again, as I mentioned before, back during the day, I don't think they actually spoke English. I'm pretty sure during that time period. And even like the dragon speaks English and stuff like that. This may just be translation in the main protagonist's mind or something like that. I'm not 100% sure. But that and in the Be Afraid, Be Very Afraid game, everyone does speak English in that world. Ultimately, sort of proving that Mr. Zarwid could possibly be the Lord High Executioner from A Night in Terror Tower, or not the Lord High Executioner, but Mr. Zarwid being basically the guy who is supposedly, or is sort of the main, the Lord High Executioner from A Night in Terror Tower and Return to Terror Tower. But anyway, guys, tell me what you think in the comment section below. I'm sorry this video is kind of long, but I do kind of owe you guys since I haven't uploaded in like a week. Really sorry about that. I am hoping to get to the Christmas uploads and stuff like that soon, probably tomorrow or the day after tomorrow. I'm going to start going to, the Christmas event, stuff like that. But anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed this video, and tell me what you think in the comments section below. Do you think that the Lord High Executioner is Mr. Zarwid? Do you think he is, the normal Lord High Executioner? Tell me what you think in the comment section below. But anyway, guys, that's the end of the video, and I hope you enjoy.